All right. Welcome to the Prospect Podcast. We have a great guest today. Guest who is, by the way, is leadership levels, from online. Obviously people know him in person, know what he is as a leader. But as far as online, how he's willing to help other coaches and other people in general, with just not just living a better life, but being a leader and all that comes along with that. So, but before we introduce him, I have my co-host, as always, Coach D, right here to my left, who does a great job himself coaching high school athletes and continue to develop them, and obviously with us also in our 7-on-7 club and all that jazz. And really, he's done a fantastic job with this podcast that we set in motion what we wanted to do here. And as we started to get the feel of it the first year and then now we're like full throttle of the kind of guests we want. And he's done a great job. He's got his own now system. Look at, it's a making sure we get everybody booked. And so, if you want to get on, like, he's like backed up guest wise, like, so you want to get in and reach out to him because all of our guests, if they were newly emerging people when they came on the show, they went on to become very, very special individuals in whatever their fields are. And if there were guys like our current guests who really have had a lot of success, we're able to also highlight what they do so well and talk about that. So it's both ends. It's guys that are emerging. We're excited about those guys. It's guys that have had years of great success, like Coach and who really we want to be able to continue to hide. So Coach Kurt Hines, it's great to have you on again. We're going to talk about quite a few different things today. We're going to dive into the weeds and maybe let a few flames fly here and there. But it's great down for any of our listeners who don't know Coach. We're going to let him kind of dive a little bit into his background, but he's been a fantastic football coach for a long time with a lot of great success there. But more than that, the football part is a big part of what he does. And as football coaches, that's kind of what gets our juices going. That's our competitive spirit, but it's really his ability to identify, what makes people great people, help them along in their journey, and to help them become better leaders, which ultimately helps all of us in this world that we're in today, to become a better leader. So it's great to have you on, Coach.
Coach, both coaches, I appreciate you having me on. As you were speaking, my mind went back. I don't know how many years ago it was that I was on for the first time. So I thought I either did something right the first time, or the two of you have had more concussions than you want to admit, and you just don't know.
Well, that too. I'm sure that's part of it. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, that could definitely be that. Like, there's a little bit of that.
We'll say it's a little bit of both. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'll make my, for your new listeners, I'm sure you guys are growing exponentially in amazing ways for what you do. But for your new listeners, I'll give a very brief recap. Grew up on the East Coast. I'm a Rhode Island kid. Grew up in Barrington, Rhode Island. Played high school football there and went to Plymouth State College. Played in Plymouth, New Hampshire. Best 9 years of my life. I'm just kidding. The little Tommy boy joke there. But
I got it. But they're called doctors. They're called doctors.
Yeah, exactly. It started coaching. I've coached high school football for 28 years now. And as Coach D and I were talking offline prior to starting to record, I think too many coaches, especially young coaches, or particularly, want to come right out of the gates and be a coordinator, or right out of the gates and make a certain amount of money. Well, for me, I was smart enough, at least back then, to the first school I reached out to wasn't even looking for a paid position. Just said, hey, I want to come on the staff and help out in any capacity. And the gentleman there, Mike Beliveau, had a head coaching position open for his freshman football program. So I did that for 7 or 8 years, loved it. Had 2 of those seasons with no assistant coaches. So messed up a lot, but in that process learned a lot also. And went on to become an assistant varsity coach at the town I lived in for a season. And 2 weeks into that, I said to my wife, I was like, "Hon, I'm done. I'm going to honor my commitment, obviously, and see through what I started." But just didn't see eye to eye with the head coach and not how he was running the X's and the O's in the program, but just how he was with people. It was just different. And then I applied to be a head coach in Bedford, New Hampshire, which was a brand new high school. Took that job. My first year, we had no seniors yet because they were phasing in the school, and we set records in the state of New Hampshire for getting beat up more than any school in the history of football. We just got our teeth kicked in. We were bad, and I can say confidently now we were bad, not because we didn't have seniors. That was a small part of it. I was just a bad head coach. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't delegate well enough to our assistant coaches and give them skin in the game. But was fortunate enough to be surrounded by great people who were patient with me.
I'm still a horrible delegator to this day. I'm way better than I was. I'm way better than I've become.
It's
someone
hard.
better.
It's really hard, especially when your name's on it.
Well, I become, and I'll let you continue on, but it's funny because it's always been my hardest thing, but it's and now that I coach my son's team, I become much better at it because when you're coaching young kids, you actually kind of need to do it because otherwise, when you got 25 kids running around, 30 kids, and they're all, they want to run around with their heads cut off, you kind of need other guys to help you with that. So so you got to make sure they all have a role and they're doing a role. But I've always had a hard time. I always had a hard time with it because it was like my excitement about it like makes me want to jump in. It took me a long time just to get average, I would say, at delegation.
Yeah,
go ahead, Coach.
Well, no, and that's a great point because I think I equate it to if you have a stud athlete on your team, and for your listeners, whether this is football or not, any sport, and they're sitting on the bench all the time, you're going to lose that young man or that young woman to just quit the sport or go play somewhere else. And I think it's the same for coaches. If you have coaches that are sitting there looking around saying, "Man, I'm here physically, but what am I doing?" I think the more and you have to find the right coach who A is there for the right reasons, B knows what he or she is doing. But once you find that individual, I think the more responsibility we can give them, the better. And I made sure at the end of every season, as I was a head coach in New Hampshire for 7 years and then Coronado for 9, to sit down with each of my assistant coaches collectively and then individually one-on-one. And, there were a number of questions I went through with them, but one of them was, do you have too much on your plate and how can I help you? Or do you not have enough and you want more responsibility? And if so, how can I help you? To make sure they have, vested, skin in the game. But to go full circle with this, just wrapped up my 28th year coaching high school football here in California. My wife and I moved out here. We're not California people for the East Coast listeners, but we had our first grandson 10 years ago. So we have 2 grandsons now, 2 more on the way. But moved out here 11 years ago and was an assistant at a private Christian school where I still teach 4th grade. I absolutely love the school. And became the head coach at Coronado for 9 years. And I'll pause there for any questions you have about that.
Yeah. So we definitely first, that you're no longer obviously at Coronado, and we'll let you elaborate on that part of the story. We'll ask some questions there. But I mean, it's interesting because one of the things that and I'm used to this myself, having been a person that's never been a teacher, and it's the reason why. Even though I did do my student teaching, but that was after I already had gotten my MBA and it was a second master's degree. And I did my student teaching. And I decided when I was doing that was when I decided I was not going to be a teacher. And actually, the funny part was I enjoyed teaching. So it wasn't that I didn't enjoy teaching. I actually enjoyed teaching, and I certainly enjoyed my nap breaks when I had my periods off. But for me, I was like, what I really liked was coaching. It wasn't that I wanted to be in the school system as far as like all day. So I realized that when I was in there, that I was like, I like teaching a ton, right? Because coaching is teaching, right? And I enjoyed that. Like when I was actually in class, I was like, this is fun, dude. But like then I had to go sit in the like cafeteria and have a conversation with everybody and like listen to like it was like I'm like I
It was
was a
like
student.
being back in high school.
Yes, you know what? That was one of the things that I said I didn't want to do. And by the way, my student teacher was a great my supervisor student teacher who was actually younger than me because I was older when I was like I think 29 or 28 when I went and did it. And he was actually 26. He was my supervisor. He was a great guy. So like I was like I had to learn from him, but I was older. And but he would bring me in as what made sense. You bring me in not cafeteria, the faculty room, and this big table of people who I didn't really know, and everybody was talking about all these different things that were going on. And I was like talking about this kid or that, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like, this is not what I want. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to sit in the Now, my father was a teacher for 9 million years, still coaching this day in his 80s.
Doing it. Still doing crazy shit.
I remember when I was in school and I used to always ask him and the other phys ed teachers, and then they allowed this one teacher, Mr. Bachman, who was a math teacher, but like he was big weightlifting guy. He was allowed to sit with them, and they would go in the cafeteria, and occasionally I'd go in and ask for money from him or something if like a good, and I would see them. They would all sit there together, and they would all eat the opposite directions from each other, and then they would talk for 5 minutes, and then they go back. They didn't want to be around the faculty stuff, you know what I mean? But they were all friends, so they would all eat in the same area. Then they would talk for 5 minutes and go back. So I said, you know what? I when I was in this faculty, I'm like, this is not me. Like, this is just not me as a person, you know? Like, so I was like, I like teaching. I loved coaching, but I did not want to be sitting there with the principal and like him having to tell me like, okay, you know, it just wasn't me. Yeah. So I realized that wasn't going to be for me, but it's so interesting. And the reason why I bring it up, because in coaching, that's really one of the most important things to this day, obviously, especially if you're in a public school, right? Being in that school, at least as the head coach, right? So when you're not a head coach, it's much harder. So I've always been a head coach, not being obviously in the school, had a lot of success, had places where I failed at, but it was always difficult for me. Always, no matter whether they were all in on me or I had a guy that, you know, they hired me reluctantly, right? It was difficult because the navigation of that process with the other teachers was always more difficult. It took longer to get buy-in from the administrations. Players, I always thought I got buy-in very quickly. Like players could be around me, know I'm real, know, you know, and it was a matter of where we were at athletically, right? And where I had to take them, whether they were low level, mid level, or already had a certain level, where I had to go. But I've never felt that was a problem. And I never, you know, parents have issues here or there. When I was younger, I had some issues, but I never thought the parents were really, and never really a monumental. I always felt like I could rally them in the right direction. And ultimately, if they didn't want me, they would work me out anyway. And I never thought of it as a huge problem. It was me to set the standards with them. They would eventually either buy into those standards and I'd be around for a longer time. They wouldn't, because it didn't mesh, and I wouldn't be. You know, that wasn't but right. Administration was always the hardest part for me. So with all having said that, I want to lead into this. This is why I bring it up. You obviously you teach at another school and being involved at Cornell. So after 9 years of having some great success, it ends. Talk about, you know, what you like really thought kind of was going on there with that kind of coming to a conclusion.
Yeah, it was. I like you had said, Coach. In my 28 years coaching, I've never coached. I've never taught, I should say, at the high school I've coached at as an assistant or as a head coach, which is not ideal. That comes with its challenges, but very similar story to what you said as far as getting buy-in from the young men, young women, and support from the families and administration. What happened here at Coronado was my first year at Coronado, we had 32 players on our team. That's it. Tiny. And that was freshmen through seniors. My first year with 32 players, we had 12 of those players academically ineligible. out of 32. The reason I share that is fast forward in the 9 years I was a head coach there, we took it from 32 young men with 12 academically ineligible to 72 or 73 young men this past season, everyone academically eligible. We went to the playoff 8 out of 9 years. And in my 9 years there, every conversation I had with any administrator, from the superintendent to the principal to the assistant principals and the AD or ADs throughout the years, was nothing but glowing. Coach, thank you so much for what you're doing. And they would bring up above and beyond the field, the academic support, the supporting the teachers if the student athletes being problematic in the classroom, whatever. So when I received a text from one of the assistant principals on a Monday, I was completely naive to what was about to happen. He said, "Hey, can you meet sometime this week to talk about next season?" So right away, my mind is, we finished last Friday. Let's start talking about the off-season strength and conditioning, because we like getting going right away with a little break. So I walk in there on a Tuesday. The main office, his office was behind the main office. So I walk past about 6 different secretary desks and then, "Hey, coach, have a seat." So I sit down, just loving life, ready to go. Let's start talking about the weight room. And he goes, "Coach, I'm going to cut to the chase." And I go, "Really?" Because no one says we're going to cut to the chase. We want to give you a vote. You know?
Yeah.
So I said, "Really?"
Absolutely not. Never the setup. That's like,
I'm going to cut you the chase. Here's $1 million.
Coach, guess what? We just upped your budget a couple grand, and we're going to build you a new facility. And no, it doesn't usually work like that.
That was not, and it hasn't happened, and I was not the first to have it happen. So I looked at him, I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, we're going to be going in a different direction." So I said, "Great. Why?" And this is what bothers me. This is really what bothers me. He said, "Coach, California, we're at-will employee state as far as coaches." I said, what do you mean at will? He said, "We don't have to tell you." I said, "Well,
New Jersey's like that too. I'm not mistaken, right?"
I'll tell you.
Yep.
So I said,
give you a reason.
Yeah, he goes, "We don't have to." I said, "Great, so you're not." He goes, "No." So I stood up, and he went to go kind of not in a violent or physical way, but grab my wrist, And I said, "No." I said, "Tim," I said, "You had a job to do. You just did it." I said, "I had a job to do for 9 years. I did mine. If you're not going to tell me why, I don't need to sit back down and have you tell me how great I am. What a nice guy."
I don't need that. Yeah.
Right.
So the part, and this is the first podcast I'm sharing this on, but I left his office and turned around. I was like, "No, that doesn't sit well." Turned around, looked at his door that was closed, and I'm not proud of this, but full transparency, I was like, "Kick it down. Just kick the damn door down and go in there." I'm a little bit more mature than that, which I wasn't sure in the moment, but I didn't kick it down. I opened it fairly aggressively, said what I had to say to him in a much more direct way. Could see that he physically was not comfortable. So I said, "Hey, Tim," I said, "I apologize." I said, you're just the messenger here right now. You're trying to keep your job, but you know what the district is doing is horrible." I said, "So whatever." Leave his office. Less than an hour later, I get an email from HR telling me I cannot go back to my coach's office to clean out because Mr. So-and-so felt threatened. So I emailed the superintendent, who had been in my coach's office multiple times over 9 years, to say very nice things. I said, "Carl," I said, "listen, I've been there for 9 years. Not that I don't trust administration, but I don't trust for them to know what's mine and what means something to me and what needs to come out. Will you come in my office for 20 minutes, just sit with me as I clean it out?" And he said, "Well, I can't, but our HR representative can, because I've got a meeting." So she came in, and it was fine. It was a good conversation. The thing that bothers me is they still, I'll never know why. Right. I do believe, and a lot of us believe, it's because we were holding team Bible studies. But even with that, the administration had said, "Hey, as long as you do it through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and it's student led," which it was, "we're fine with that." There was a young woman who was the head lacrosse coach for Coronado last spring. Coronado's girls lacrosse won state for California, not just San Diego section, was
the entire state.
The entire state.
Wow.
And they let her go without no explanation. And she wasn't having any team Bible study or anything of the sort. And they let her go without an explanation, which she believes was because of parent complaints, playing time. And for me, it's just, I'm like, do better. If we're really in this, whether you're in education or not, as you said, Coach Schumann, if you're a coach, you're a teacher in some capacity. You're teaching how young men and women not only play the sport, but navigate through challenges in life and have hard conversations. And they weren't ready, or they never will be. They weren't willing to have that hard conversation. If they wanted me to be on campus, then tell me that. And I'd say, no, I'm not going to make that happen, or yeah, let's make that happen. If it were, whatever the reason was, I wanted a reason, but I realized now I won't get one.
Yep.
It's been a big paradigm shift for me. Main reason being, for 28 years, I hate that I'm saying the word preach, but I would preach to our young men and to our coaches, don't let football define who you are. Because there's going to come a day when your playing days are over. There's going to come a day when your coaching's over. And I meant it to my core. But when I got fired, I was like, oh, damn. I wasn't practicing. It wasn't consciously, but subconsciously, I wasn't practicing what I was preaching, because I was like, who am I? If I'm not a coach, who am I? And I know I am a husband, a father, a grandfather, a teacher, an author, and all these other things that I think make me important. The fact is, I allowed football to be more of my identity than maybe it should have been at that time. But overwhelming, as I was talking once again with Coach D offline briefly, support from across the country for coaches such as yourselves and other people reaching out, showing support. Several different job offers, but my wife and I didn't and don't want to move. So right now I'm looking at a season where it's a greater chance than not that I'm going to take a year off and see what happens from there.
Yeah, I tell you, it's one of the most frustrating things. So I understand, your pain. And it's the way that the system is, especially public school wise, which is only what I've only been a head coach at in is public school. So I understand what it's like. It is frustrating because you would like to get at least answers, like you'd like to get answers. And luckily in most of my situations, they're trying to, when I've had to step down, they're trying to get me to resign. So they start bringing up a bunch of things. So I make the decision, and they bring up some stuff, and I'm like, well, what did you really want me to do? If you just tell me, then I could take you the direction. But I say this because people can manufacture like a wrong conversation into something negative. And that's one of the difficult things in coaching always, is that everything is on the table at all times. And you could be that lacrosse coach that won the state championship, and we don't even know. Like, maybe it is a parent. Maybe she ran a club team that she does on her own time, and one of those players came to her school, and they didn't like that. That was one of the last things that happened to me. Like, that was what used, as really the main issue. I'm sure there were other things that they really wanted to say, but that was one. The issue they could kind of hone in on, you know what I mean? So, like, even when they tell you what it is that always what it is? You don't even know. But it is a crazy part of coaching and our society, in that coaches who, outside of guys in college at the highest level and pros, like high school coaches, are the lowest paid guys and girls, in what they do. And when we were like, when people go after coaches, even when a coach doesn't do a good job, it's like, dude, you realize this guy's like not getting paid very much. Like, if you're going to replace a person, like, recognize that the time they're putting in, even some of the worst coaches are still putting in a phenomenal amount of time, right? So that part is one of the things that I always find as coaching is, like, even when you have glory and success, like, meaning winning wise, or you win a championship or one of those things, it's one of those things where it's you have to really even if you don't outwardly show that you're soaking up the moment, you have to enjoy each and one of those moments.
Yes.
It's like when a kid goes on to a college, you have to enjoy those moments, even if it's just to yourself. You guys say to yourself, "Hey, that's pretty cool," because you're not going to get patted on the back. And I think one of the things when, you're a competitor, like as much as you're a coach, you're a competitor, and the competitive spirit part of a coach is that when you do something great, like when you were an athlete, okay, you ran for a touchdown, or even if you were on an offensive line, you pancake blocked somebody. Like there was a lot of other people that gave you that immediate feedback. Sometimes your coaches or other players said, "Great job." So as a competitor, you would get these immediate feedbacks, positive and negative, that would help your growth, right?
Yeah.
But as a coach, you could literally go 40 years, 50 years, win championship after championship, and walk away feeling like, did I really, really have an impact? And you do, because there are kids, luckily, and there are parents, luckily, and God bless those few people that do it, that let you know it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, your reward is that nobody said, "Hey, negative things about you," because that means that you're kind of were in the mostly right direction, and I think that's what's hard as a competitor. Like to me, coaching is part of that competitive. It's changing lives because you're in a leadership role, but you're still at heart a competitor. Like you want to succeed. And as a competitor, what we're most of the time you get for most of your life until you become a coach is immediate feedback as a competitor, negative and positive. Like the negative is as good as the positive sometimes, you know?
I completely agree. And for me, that's that as a coach, competitor, as an educator, for me, and when I said to the administration, and I sent them an email about 2 weeks after when I had calmed down a lot, I sent an email to about 5 individuals and just titled it "Do Better." Because what do we do as coaches? Like one of my biggest pet peeves as a coach is when I have an assistant coach, when a player messes up on the field, they take them off and they berate them and they don't put them back in. And you're just letting them sit and stew on the mistake they made.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you just said, coach, they could have gone 17 plays doing their job well.
Right.
They messed
But
up
that's
one,
what you highlight.
and then you have them sit there and you don't coach them up. I'm like, no, listen, if you need to pull someone off, pull them off for a play or two.
Right back.
Coach them up, get their confidence back where it needs to be, or they're wicked, overly confident, cocky. Just humble them, get them, do your job, and then get them back on the field. So for me, it was like the administration, whether they wanted to keep me or not. If you're really in it to better the lives of those we're blessed to teach and coach, then give those coaches you're getting rid of, hey, when you end up somewhere else, we didn't like the way you did this or that or whatever.
Agree.
But I also realize that, intrinsically, if we're waiting for that outside praise or that outside correction, it's never going to be enough for what we want. We've got to make sure we know inside the difference we're making. Like you said, Coach Schumann, we know for all three of us, the countless lives we've changed, and that's why we do it.
But it is very tough. Like, so, in I'll tell you this. This is one of the things that I understand why the system is this way, because a lot of it has to do with lawsuits, and schools can't handle. They really don't have the financial wherewithal. If all of a sudden a bunch of people came out with them and they were giving out those feedbacks, and all of a sudden they, lawyer. I honestly believe that's what it is. Whereas, like big gigantic corporations, in a lot of cases, do give some level of feedback on it because of the fact that they're trying to save themselves from a lawsuit. It's the opposite in corporate and private industry, because by giving the feedback, they're saving themselves. They're getting their ducks in a row. So but in public school, it's almost the opposite. Like they're doing it because they don't trust the administrators and the people that are in charge to give the feedback in a manner that won't get them sued.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Because, and I think that's a little bit of an indictment of our overall educational system. Because we can't even trust our leaders to like tell people something that might be uncomfortable for both of them, and that like, because they might get, how are we training these guys then? You know what I mean? And part of it is I think, my experience with public schools, part of it is the way the public school rewards leadership is they view it as you've been a great teacher. Okay. Now you're going to become an administrator because you've been a great teacher. Okay. Now there are some people that it works out really well because that's their next evolution. There are some people that need actual leadership training, a much better leadership training
Absolutely.
as a part of becoming their leader. And being a teacher is not enough of the next qualifier, meaning, oh, I get my master's in this and now I'm ready to go out there and be an administrator. And I think that's part of what happens. Some places do a great job of that, and you have that. Some places don't, and you have a disaster. And so that's where you all of a sudden get these policies that come in everywhere where they're like, well, we're just not giving anybody any feedback on these things because we don't want Coach Kern Hines to turn around and say, hey, they said this was the reason they fired me. I did these things. I'm going to sue for my job because, and I think that's what goes into it. And it's the most frustrating thing, but in my opinion. And, it's one of those things where, like, in life, I've always gone back and forth as a conservative politically. I'm not really for a lot of the teachers unions and what they represent, but I do understand why the teachers unions are necessary at the same time. So even though I think that what they do leadership wise at a teachers union is very detrimental to kids learning, maybe administrative leadership, I do understand the flip side of what can happen when you're a teacher and an administrator comes in and gives you, some BS, right? So I see both sides of that part of it. So like me on the conservative political hat, like front of things of what I believe in, I don't align with a lot of the teacher, in our state, the NJA's principles of things, but I do understand from an individual teacher standpoint why those things can happen. As the same way I understand as a coaching standpoint, like how those things can be really, really negatively affect coaches, right? And the reason why I hate it is because when you go to the next job, okay, this is why I hate it. When you go to the next job, you could be the greatest coach in the history of coaches. And you got to answer questions that you don't know the answers to. You really don't know the answers to those questions. The question is, well, you were let go here, or you resigned here. And why did you choose to resign, or why did you step down? And you give the answer as you see it. And they're looking at you like possibly cross-eyed. You know what I mean? Like, well, I don't know what the other side is saying. I don't really know that answer. So it's hard for me. I could tell you what feedback that I've been able to gather and what I see is what it is. But if you don't see it as what I see it as, I can't control that. You know what I mean? I can only control what I can control. So I always think that that's the hard part for coaches when they go. By the way, there's some coaches I've seen that go get the next job. I would love to interview those guys because they must be amazing at handling those questions, and there's one that we're friends with that seems to get a job every single, like, you know what I'm talking about right there. He just got a job. Okay. And he's a master at it. I don't know how he does it. Like, I don't know, because he has to answer that question every single time. And he must be a master at it, but I see those sides of things. So I'd love for you to talk about, like, what you see is some of the things, because I've talked about what I see is some of the flaws but what some of the things that you think can help coaches as they kind of navigate in their career on these kind of issues that are very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and I'm smiling and laughing at myself as I even answer this, because, well, it came to fruition. I have said for years that my faith is something that's a hill I'll die on. Well, right. I did. I died on it.
But hey, we talk about the resurrection all the time, right? So, like, right? Here we go, right? So it all it all comes together.
Yeah. This answer, building upon that, I think some of your listeners might really get this, and some might be like, oh, that's a bunch of BS. But I believe this to my core. I think for all of us, if we're going to coach, whether it's 1 year at the youth level to the NFL or anything in between, or 28 years, whatever it is, have a strong why. because even though I did kind of bust my own chops and say, hey, I was lying to myself. I let being a football coach identify who I was for too long. It was really a 2-week process for me. I went in a 2-week process of having 3 emotions. One, being really at peace with it, saying, all right, God, I don't get it. I don't like it, but I trust you. And that's where I am. That's where 99% of me is right now. But in those first 2 weeks, it was that, and it could switch in a dime to just crying. Like full transparency, coaches, just thinking about that young man on the team whose mom, you have a young man on the team whose father passed away when he was a year and a half old in the military. And the mom, in the 2 years that he had played for us so far, would reach out to me almost every other week saying, hey, when so-and-so comes home, he told me you said this and this and this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then the third emotion just being my old college days, like, let's go get arrested. Let's go break someone's nose. Let's go finish this the right way. Let's get back to the 80s. And just let's go finish the way we should, which I realized would only put myself in prison and on my family. But what a story to tell, that should be my next book. The decision I shouldn't have made.
That's true.
But I think for coaches that are going to be in the game long enough that, they say there's 2 types of coaches, those who have been fired and those who haven't been yet, but will be, or however the saying goes. I'm sure I'm messing it up. Well, I'm now a part of that group that I never thought I would be or never wanted to be. But knowing your why, I've been blessed, Coach Schumann, you mentioned this earlier in the podcast about, getting parents to be on your side a little bit. And that's part of our jobs. I've been blessed in my 28 years to coach to have tremendous support from 99% of the people I've coached, coached with, coached for, as far as the parents and everything else. That being said, you're never going to please everyone. And I never coached a single day, not one snap, not one rep for an administrator or for a parent. It was always for the young man that was putting the helmet on.
Correct.
That was going to strap up the pads and give their best, whether they were a stud in the making, if they were never going to be a stud, but they were part of something bigger than themselves. That's why I coach. So for me, I can look back after it's been maybe almost 2 months now. Gosh, that's gone by fast. Since I got fired, I think my advice is have a strong enough why, because when the storms come, and they're going to come,
and they're gonna.
I had a pastor say in church one time, there's 3 stages of all our lives. You're either coming out of a storm, you're in one right now, or hold on because there's one coming. And that's coaching to a T. And that you could say, listen, not only is that coaching throughout a career, that's coaching on an offensive series. You're going to have, all those different stages. So I think coaches just need to be themselves and understand that we're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone's going to like us. And it sounds like maybe you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Coach Schumann, but in some of what you shared, there are going to be coaches that are hired because they are the right coach. They know their sport, they know their trade, they're pouring into the young men, giving an exponential amount of hours above the pay grade, like we all do, who are hired by the right people, and then that principal leaves or that AD leaves, and then someone comes in who has a buddy or a friend, and they'll make up any excuse to get rid of you.
It's happened to me.
Yeah, it sounds like that. And we have no control over that. No matter how tough we think we are, no matter how good we are, we have zero control over that. So I think my advice would be, A, coach for the right reason. And I can't answer that. You can't answer that. Coach D can't answer that. Each individual needs to figure out, what's our why? Why am I doing this? Is it, hey, I want to coach the NFL some year or someday and make millions? Well, that's never been my desire or my path. Great for the people that it is. For me, it's I want to make a difference. I want to bless, serve, and empower as many people as I can. I know I had the opportunity to do that for 28 years. And now I'm in a season I find myself where I only applied for one job. I was telling Coach D, I had 4 interviews for this one job. School a mile and a half from our road, or down the road from our house, rather. Made it down to the final 2. They chose a coach who I hope will do great things. He had been on the staff there before. But I don't want to just end up somewhere else. And having been a head coach twice now, I know, and I want to be very careful with my words here. If you're a passionate coach, I don't care if you're a paid assistant, a volunteer, whatever, it's a lot of work.
Yep.
That being said, if you're a head coach, it is so much more work, and I don't want to go be an assistant again somewhere right now. Now that might change in a year or 2 or 5, But right now, I want to make sure that the next school I show up at, if I do, is the right fit for me. There's a private school, probably about 25 minutes away from my house, that just opened up. The pay is ridiculous. And at full transparency on your podcast here, I was like, no, it just doesn't. I don't feel it. I'm not feeling it. But I did go onto their website. For first thing it says, I might lose a lot of followers on here from this comment, but screw it. I don't care. Truly, it's a DEI school. Nope. I don't want to coach at that school. Not that I don't love everyone. Not that I don't think everyone has a. I want to be able to go somewhere where I can share my faith, and it doesn't have to be a private school, but I want to go somewhere where I can be me and not have to worry about my fitting into someone else's mold. And that job may or may not open up for me, and I'm okay with that.
I think that's very, very important, especially as you get older as a coach.
Self-awareness.
Okay? Yeah.
Because when you're young, like, you don't yet know what you don't know. So you're just kind of, you'll take jobs, you'll go for it. And, it works out, it doesn't. And you kind of learn, you figure you're learning those things along the way, which you do. Like, then you start to shape who you are as you get older. And then if you're in a situation, you kind of shaped who you are. And then you realize, oh my goodness, like, this place really isn't who I actually am, even though I'll always do right by the kids and do the best. You kind of, you start to know in your head that there may be a clock in like, and like I said, like I dragged Coach D with me. So to the place, although it's worked out for him. He's at a great place. He's coaching but when we're at, I brought him with me, and the guy who was an AD was a great guy. He was exactly who we wanted to work for. Like, and then he got in there. Before the season started, he had would have a meeting with other coaches, and he turns, he says, I gotta apologize to Coach Schumann. This is before I've only been there a few months. I haven't officially started, just getting the kids in workouts and stuff, right? And Coach D, I don't think was there, because I think it was just head coaches. So, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm this new guy. And he's like, he's like all the other head coaches, everyone's now looking at me. He's like, I got you to come here and I think you'll do great. He's like, but I'm retiring after this season.
Oh.
And I called Coach D. I was like, what did I do? I was like, oh my God. So now he was there that whole year. He was phenomenal. The guy's a great AD, like a great guy. And then COVID hit, and he was no longer the AD, and it was just like a ticking time bomb, in my opinion. But we managed through it for COVID, and then that was the end. But that was my last coaching job. But that's an example. Like, I can't give any better example of this guy. I wasn't even his guy in the sense that I didn't know him, but we just clicked. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, this is he realized this is a guy I would want coaching for me, and this is I would want to coach for this guy. Like, this is who I want to be. And I already had gone through this process where I was at a place. I chose that place because of the AD. I was turning around a program at another place, and because of the AD, was a great guy. So now I was like, I'm only going to go to another place with another AD who I think is a great guy. And this was the guy that he's gone. I said, oh my God, I just left the place where they were throwing money at me and they loved me. And I was turning around this program and to go where a complete unknown.
Yeah.
But it was yeah, like you learn from that, and it ended up going in the direction where I thought probably it eventually would go. Unfortunately, Coach D had to get some quick growth phasing going, and had to take over some times when they made me sit out. But it ended up working out, and that's why I said where faith kind of worked out, because you know what it allowed me to do? I probably would not have started coaching my kid. And I told Coach D this, not in the way that I coach him now. You know what I mean? Like I went to his soccer game, and we were coaching at this place. And I went to a soccer game, like a 5-year-old soccer game. And he was over there crying. Like, it was just, after a game on Friday night, so we had our workouts, an early morning workout and film. And I'm like, the only thing I can think about is, let me just go over here watch him for a few seconds until I can go back and watch some more film. You know what I mean? Like that was what's going on in my head. And I'm over there, he's crying and he's crying and crying. And this is when I was still in the mix of it. And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. I had no idea. Like my wife's there. I had no idea what was going on, why he was crying, why he was unhappy. Had no idea what this soccer league was about. I didn't know any of it. I would just show up for the 30 minutes. And I was doing that at other things that he was doing.
Yep.
Show up to watch him, had no clue what was going on. And I'm like, you know what? Like, soon he's going to be in real, 6 years old, he'll probably start to play real sports where, like, he'll be on a team. Maybe I might want to help. And I'm not even having able. So when it ended up working out where they pretty much wanted me to resign, I was like, at first I was upset. But literally within 24 hours, I'm like, I'm just going to pour in my kid, Yeah. So, and that's where I say faith will take you where you should go, because that's where God wanted me to start to go. Now, maybe a year from now, it changes. For these past 5 years, that's kind of been my direction with that. It's helped my business. It's helped this podcast that we've had to be able to grow. We would not have been able to grow it the way that we've grown it if I was still a head coach. There's no way, because that would be all I would be thinking about. Yep. Even when I wasn't there thinking about it, I would still be thinking about it, because that's just how you are as a coach, So, coaching my son's sports, yes, we're all in with the kids that we help out. But, it is still youth sports in the sense that, like, it's not like we, I'll break down film because I'm probably more passionate about things than other coaches, but I'm not, I'm not in there like I was in high school, like.
It's funny. I had over Christmas break, a buddy of mine who's a retired naval officer. He also retired firefighter, but coaches baseball. He went to go grab Starbucks one day, and he's like, maybe you're just used to the chaos. And I was like, Mark, what are you talking about? Like, I love my life. And I took it not offensively, but I took it as a knock, so to speak. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, Kurt, you've told me for 28 years, coaching high school football, I would typically go to bed around 2 a.m. on a Friday night, because once you get home after a game, you're going to have something.
Oh, hell yeah.
You're going to watch film. My alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning Saturday to get ready to go to the high school for a coach's meeting. He's like, that's chaotic. And I never thought about it, but for 28 years, I was living in chaos. I was like, huh. He's like, maybe you just need a break for a minute, or however long that is.
Yeah.
And even as you were talking about going to coach your son, I think sometimes God will close doors for us that we would never close ourselves. I loved, we had the banquet a week after I was fired. And the human resource person that was watching me clean out my office, she was, Coach, are you going to be at the banquet? Now I was ready for a fight. Not with her. She's an older woman, but I was ready for a fight. So I said,
I love your intensity, dude. It's unbelievable.
I said, Donna, I will 100% I'll be there. Expecting her to say no. And I'm like, well, call the police now, because you're not going to stop me. Not that I think I'm that tough, but I've given not my life, but a huge part of it to these young men and these families. Mm-hmm. Let me see this one thing through. And it was off campus, so I knew they had no right to say no.
Right.
So she asked me, I said, I 100% will be there. And she said, good, we've been getting a lot of, and she paused, she's HR, she goes, I think the parents and players will like that. So went to the banquet, made it all about the student athletes, which it always should be. And I have, for all the years I've been a head coach, my final statements are, and not in this particular order, but thanking the parents for trusting us with your children, thanking the players, because you're the ones that make all the difference. And then I always finish with looking over my wife. She was sitting to my left, thanking our wives. I looked over my left, and she's just a mess. So I lost it. I start crying, said my final words, standing ovation longer than it was like out of the movies. It was pretty cool. In the moment, I was like, F that. Let's just go. I'm done. Because my heart was here in my throat now. And we stuck around for another hour or so, taking pictures with players and families and hearing very nice things and stuff. But when you mentioned about going, God will do those things. My wife, we loved our 9 years in Coronado. We live off island, but our time there were 3 or 4 times where she would say, Kurt, don't you want to go coach somewhere else? And I'd be like, what do you mean? She said, well, you only have 900 students at Coronado in the entire high school. You have the naval base. I hate our government, too corrupt. But I love our military. I love those men and women. Yeah. So she said, would you want to coach somewhere else? I'm like, no, I'm not leaving anywhere else. No, I don't want to go. And I feel like God did close that door that I would have never closed myself. to do what I don't know yet. But I'm also a firm believer that if we make ourselves available and say, hey, God, I don't have that title of coach right now. So once a coach, always a coach, but I don't have a team right now. But as long as I wake up every day with the intent of going out there and trying to bless, serve, and empower someone, he will either open another coaching door for me, or if not, make known for me where I'm meant to be. And it also reminds me that, I often talk to, different speaking engagements, or when someone will say, hey, what's some advice you would give to a new coach? I almost always go to, it's not about us. And then when I got fired, it was maybe 2 or 3 days afterwards. I was like, okay, all right, Kurt, let me call my own bluff. Like, this isn't about me. This may have nothing to do with me. God might be protecting us from something that's going to happen down the road in Coronado, or it could be that the new coach that got hired on 2 days later, by the way, that was crazy. There were so many people on Twitter with the best of intentions that were saying, hey, coach, you're sending me private messages. We looked up, people went out of their way, dozens of people that would look up the contract for Coronado High School with their employees. And there should be a 10-day grace period between you letting go of a position and before you close the job application, whatever. And I said, listen, I'm not suing anyone. That's a road I don't want to go down. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, Coach Schumann, they may never say the real reason, but they'll make one up to make sure that you don't win that.
And then I've been down that road a couple times myself. I think that like if there was actual like someone did purposely damage your reputation, that's a different situation. If they don't do that and it's like then it just I would say like it just sucks, because I actually talked to some great lawyers when some of these things have happened, and I always thought they gave me great advice. Like they always tell you, listen, if you go down that road, it'll be hard to get another job, and those are the kind of things. And he said, now if they do damage to you, then that's a different story, because no one's not going to hire you if someone purposely does damage to you. But if they didn't like you for whatever reason, they wanted to go in a different direction for whatever reason, or they had no reason whatsoever, I always thought like you just kind of have to like swallow. Like for me, it always was partially swallowing my own pride. Like we could always, as coaches, say, hey, it is all about the kid. When you're coaching, it's all about the kids. But it's blind to say that you don't put your own ego into it. That's part of what makes you a good coach.
Well, and I agree. And I also think, one of the we have I think
you have pride in who you are. Like how else are the kids going to get pride in who they are if you don't have pride in who you are? You don't have principles and standards. They derive that from you. The energy comes from you, right? And your assistants. And so you have to have an ego. Like if you went in as a coach and said, well, it's all about you guys. And, I mean, ain't no kid getting motivated.
Anyway, yeah. We have a coach on our staff, Coach Mike Pompa. He is, I believe he's 80 now, coached for 44 or 45 years at the collegiate level and high school level. He was on our staff the past 5 years. And this guy's seen more, done more, and just a legend in my mind, just a great man. And he had called me several different times since that all went down. He's like, I've never seen it handled that way, and very supportive. But then he shared something with me the day after the banquet, just praising me, just how I handle it, and the teaching. I think, getting back to the whole suing thing, which was never something that my wife and I wanted to do, and we're not going to at all. Unless like you said, if there had been, which there wasn't, any defamation of character. But I think sometimes we forget as coaches that even as fired coaches, our young men and young women, those athletes are still watching us. And how is coach going to lose and defeat? How is he going to handle this? Is he going to go online and say all these horrible things about administration, all these different things? And one of the final things I said at the banquet was, I'm not going to allow a 5-minute conversation take away from 9 years of blessings. And that's what I have to choose. And I do choose to focus on is all the wonderful things that happened. Well, shame on me if I'm allowing the 5-minute negative conversation to dictate the rest of all those years.
That's right. That's right. Because you did so many great things for them. And
right.
That's the hardest thing to in the moment, to remember because every listen, the toughest human beings have feelings. So like, when you build something up, the hardest thing about when you've been responsible for helping build something up and you see all the great success these kids have, and you start to think, oh, these kids could use my help, which is obviously true, but it doesn't. But it becomes one of those things that it was said to me. It was a harsh thing at the time, but one of my answers is, kids are resilient. Like they'll always appreciate what you did, but they'll also always be able to handle and adjust what the next thing gives to them. And that's where faith does become a big part of it, that they can go and handle those things. And hopefully they have good parents that can help them. The kids who don't, I always feel the worst for kids that don't have great parent representation, where those kids have to figure out more on their own. And I always feel the hardest for those kids. And those are the kids who I always tried to help the longest after I was no longer there, as long as I could.
Yeah.
Sometimes to your own detriment, where they become even reliant, and you're like, hey, listen, you have to also start to figure these things out too. But you feel for those kids the most because they don't have great situations where they can get guidance, right? But for the most part, kids who have, good parents, doesn't matter whether they agree with you or don't agree with you, but they're going to be resilient to a certain extent. And
that's what we want.
I'll give you a great story because I want you to dive into more of this stuff.
Yeah.
But great story. And Derek will understand this too. There's a coach in New Jersey, and I learned this lesson. I always use this all the time. Okay. Who's the greatest football high school coach in the history of New Jersey, bar none. No one would argue with anybody if you brought it up. Okay. Has won championships. Other than the very first place he was head coach, where he took him to the playoffs, which was my alma mater. I didn't play for him, but I was a young kid when he was that good. Every other place he won state championships, and I mean multiple state championships.
Yeah.
He's the greatest head coach in the history of New Jersey, a guy named Greg Toll. And he got let go as head coach. Still kind of almost it wasn't his prime. I would say it was start to be towards
tail end.
But he was still winning in a ridiculous amount of games, okay? His team was top, might have won the national championships one year. I think they did.
Two.
But, top 20 rated program every single year. And he got let go. When he got let go, I immediately thought, because I was still a head coach at the time, somewhere, I don't remember where. But I thought to myself, if he could get let go, anybody can be let go.
Yeah.
The greatest coach in New Jersey history. Not when he was like bumbling down the road, not talking anymore or something. Like still winning a boatload of games in state championships. And he didn't get along with somebody that was, they thought he was too big. This is the word I got. He was too bigger than the school, becoming bigger than the school. And, that's, whether that was true or not, who knows? But the guy was bigger than life. I mean, literally, Derek coached with him for a year. He was bigger than life, like bigger than life. And he got let go. So that was my story number one. And my story number two is from a fictional thing. So one of my favorite shows to watch was Friday Night Lights, the television series. I read the book, watched the movie, and the series was the greatest.
I agree. The best out of three.
Oh, it was the greatest. So the book was the truth, but like the series was just so great. Yeah. And he goes and he builds up Dylan into this powerhouse, right? And they're a powerhouse program, and a dad comes in that brings in this hot shot OC. Okay. He's a young guy. He's a fantastic play caller and all these things. And his son's the quarterback of that team. And they get into it. And basically the head coach, if you saw, gets in his stance that no parent is going to run my program. I don't know how much money he is, even though his quarterback's great. And I'm not pushing this kid ahead of another quarterback that I have that's doing a great job. Well, lo and behold, he gets fired and he goes across town, right, to East Dillon or whatever. And he ends up building them up, and they went, it's that whole saga. But I always thought it always thought to me, just remember, like, as good as state championship coach you are, it's not always what you want to happen. There's always other things going on in the world. And that show, like, makes it so true. He's high standards. He expects so much. He coaches so hard, right? And he holds kids accountable. He's principled, and he wasn't going to back down. And, and by the way, he did try to work with him. It wasn't like he wasn't personable.
Right.
He would sit in those booster meetings. He would, he was trying to figure out, he was playing him and stuff, and he was trying to figure out how he could make it all work. But in the end, as Coach Nick Rapone, who just retired himself from the Tampa Bay Bucks, as a DB coach, said to me, you can't serve two masters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a very hard thing. So I always say that those are two of my things that always stick with me, is like, as a coach, you just have to always move forward and keep moving on. And because you're not always in control. It's just like what you tell your players, like, you control the controllables. You can't control things you can't control.
Exactly. And I think to piggyback on the Friday Night Lights, my wife and I often say every town has a Buddy Garrity.
Yes.
Buddy Garrity.
Yeah, right.
Someone who's going to tell you you're the most wonderful coach in the world, but behind your back, they're conniving. They're trying to figure things out for their own agenda. And we know
they pushed Buddy out, by the way. That was the greatest part of that series. By the way, I watched every episode like 70 times. That's why I know. But they end up pushing Buddy out, and then Buddy comes over and helps him.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Life is funny, right? That's why faith is important. Like, Buddy Garrett gets a piece of his own medicine.
Yes.
And now has to go hat in hand over to him and then helps him, right? So the world is funny. Like, everybody learns lessons. I'm sorry, go.
No, I love it. You're absolutely right. I think, for me, and we've touched a little bit on it, but my faith is everything, and if I'm going to, for the past 28 years, daily, if not, but I believe daily, pray, God, help me to be the best coach I can be, the best husband I can be, the best father I can be, the best grandfather I can be. If we're going to pray those prayers and truly mean them, then really what we're saying is, God, I'm open for adversity. I'm ready for challenges, which who in their right mind says that, but we understand that's part of the growth. That's part of all that we have to go through. So it's a humbling thing, but it's also, as coaches, we always say, not only control the controllables, but hey, what's the biggest play? The next one.
Right.
What's my biggest move as a coach? The next one. And that might be literally in a coaching capacity, or it might be just in a leadership of, hey, outsiders, whether it's on Twitter or former players or parents or administrators, watching from afar, seeing, all right, who is he really? What's he really made of, and how's he going to live this? And I think even for my wife and I, we have 4 children that are our children are all now 28 through 34. We have adult children.
Yes.
But they're watching how we navigate through this. And I had a friend of mine, he owns a clothing manufacturer. So we did our team stores through this gentleman. He called me on Friday, texted me, said, hey, can you give me a call? So I called him. And he goes, all right, coach, check and see how you're doing. He goes, and I don't want the social media answer. And I laughed. I said, well, Roger, you're not going to like my answer then. He was like, why? I said, because it's the same thing. I'm doing great. I still have moments where I get pissed. I still have moments where it hurts. And I haven't been through it yet, because I haven't had a Friday night yet where
that's the hardest. There's no doubt that's the hardest.
There's going to come
still the hardest. 5 years later for me, it's still the hardest. When I watch a game, you say to yourself, like, I should be down there on the sidelines, like doing it, So, but then I also go back and when I walk out and my son's sitting there and watching the other teams, watching him, and he's playing with his friends. And then I walk out and I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be down there. Maybe I should be here. It's good to constantly ask that question. Like, that's why God, like, when you have God in your life, right? You open up the Bible and you get a couple of questions answered. You know what I mean? And then you have another question, like you're like, and you could open it up and get another couple of questions answered. And maybe you don't get the question answered. You got to figure some parts out for yourself, right? Like God does. To me, there are things that God's created the Bible and obviously faith is so he can help you get some questions answers that he needs. And sometimes I think he wants you to, hey, you know what? You got to figure some of these things out. Like that's, you got to figure it out too. Like I can't just, I can't just give the ChatGPT version of everything for you. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, to trust the process. When we as coaches have a young man on the way, like, coach, I can't gain weight or I can't lose weight or whatever it is. Trust the process. What do you mean? Just keep showing up. Keep showing up. Keep putting in the work. It might be a week, a month, a year. Sooner or later, you're going to see it. And I think as Christians, we have to realize that God is the ultimate play caller. He's got the playbooks right. Yeah, actually, it's behind my computer right now. The Bible here. We have the playbook. So few of us really open it up and study it. We'll look at it once in a while. What's a cool play that looks like it's going to work right now? But we need to trust the play caller and truly not just say, but give our lives to him. Say, God, I'm here. Here I am. What do you want me to do? And while I'm waiting, and this has been my prayer now for the past month and a half, 2 months, while I'm waiting for what's next, let me be a good steward of what you've given me right now. Because I have everything I've ever wanted and more, and I'm a little bit fatter than I should be. Should have a little bit more money in the bank. But you know what? I'm blessed. And if I realize that and go forward trying to serve others, that right coaching position or opportunity or more time with my grandsons or wife or whatever it is, it's going to be made known to me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's always, being competitive person, it's a gift, but it's also something you have to manage within yourself. It's very hard being a competitive person because the first thing that always goes right back to your head is like, I want to win.
Yep.
Like I want to win. And it's like in any part of your life, like, how can I win? How can I get somebody better? And, and if you think back to when your kids were young, right. And maybe they were, playing sports and you wanted them to, I don't know, practice more. Right. And you try to rationalize it in your head and you say, if you just do this, and this, you're going to get to here. And then they say to themselves, yeah, I'll do this, but I don't feel like doing this again and again, and I'll take the next 2 days. And you're like, okay, how could I position this to them that they can understand that it'll help them? And then sometimes they don't even want it to be positioned. Sometimes they do. But and it teaches you, just like when your children probably come to you as an adult and they're dealing with like real life things as adults, right? That kids don't deal with. And you're living yourself and you're thinking, man, I just started to figure that thing out myself like a year ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got to give it another adult who's my kid this advice. And it's funny because my father's 80, going to be 85, 84 years old. And it's so many times we get into these debates, right? And like he'll get on a soapbox and something, and I'll be like, that doesn't make any sense. And he'll be like, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe you're right in this one, maybe I'm wrong. And you think, wow, like he's 84. He doesn't have infinite wisdom,
None of us do.
He's a person, right? So the greatest part though, as a son, when you have a father that definitely is pretty smart and usually right on things. When I'm right, I'll take anyone I can get. But it's just kind of the nature of it all. And I think you'll end up landing in a spot that's a great fit for you. And sometimes you got to go into the desert, and the desert isn't always the funnest place to be, but right. But you know what? Someone brought someone brought Jesus water when he needed it most, right? Yep. So and someone found Moses in Oasis where out of nowhere, and when he thought he was done. So those things are just simple stories. That's what makes the Bible great, by the way. Like totally like simple stories like that, you go to yourself, you're like, man, like I already kind of knew this, but thank you for telling me again.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's with the Bible, with anything else in life, with parenting. I think we all have the answers of how to be a great parent until what? Until we had children. Then we go, oh crap,
right.
Wait a minute. This is all different. We all know the perfect play to call when we're sitting at home on our couch watching the game.
Oh yeah.
And I think in life it's through those hardships, it's through the trials that hurt the most, but that's when we do see the biggest growth, and we find out who's really in our corner, who is that family member, or who are those family members, those friends that no matter what our title is, still love us and are there for us and all
Absolutely.
that. So I think there's blessings in all things if we're willing to look at that through God's eyes and not just our own, hey, how can this serve me type mentality.
It is. And by the way, I was just thinking about the football games yesterday, and where my mind goes, every time they put Ben Johnson, by the way, on the screen, I keep waiting for Carl Lewis to come out and run a race against him. Like how could a guy's name, like the most infamous, by the way, sprinter of all time, but the guy's name is actually Ben Johnson. It's hilarious to me, but it's amazing. Like, listen, you know what's great too about sports, and what's great about having like a thing like the NFL and pro sports is you see guys who are, arguably the greatest coaches in their sport in the world, right? And there's like 10 job openings there because these guys are getting fired,
Yeah.
So, those guys reached the very pinnacle and probably did as many right things as we done, maybe like even, 10 times more right, to get all the way to the highest of the highest level between not just their coaching ability, but navigating that process. That's as good a coaches as they are. They're also great. I mean, they have to be master navigators to be able to navigate that road. So, and they get fired, right? They reach the top and they're falling harder than you could ever imagine, like, being all the way to the top, even the greatest of the greatest. But that's what's so interesting about it. Well, I'm curious what for you, and like, what are the things that you come away with from coaching for all those years now that you have a break that are lessons for yourself? You know what I mean? Within like, just for your own kind of moving forward and life experiences that other people who are currently leaders could take with them.
I think my heart still goes back to one of the first things I shared was it's not about me. Christ's life wasn't about him. It was about what he could do for countless others and serving others. And as someone who currently doesn't have a team, can I still be what I believe is a great leader? Yes, I can lead my wife. I can lead our son, our daughters, our grandsons, and I think one of my big takeaways already, and we haven't even had spring ball. Spring ball is coming up in another month and a half, 2 months now. It'll be my first spring without spring ball, and then my first summer for 28 years without summer workouts. I think one of the takeaways is we know how much time we dedicate until we step away from it and go, wow, wait a minute.
That was a lot more than I really thought. I think that's what COVID did for a lot of people. Yeah. Dave can attest to this. I've said this a bunch of times. There was a lot of movement post-COVID because if you think of like COVID hit and it was spring, right? So it was out of season, but it showed people because now they stepped away from maybe stuff that they did voluntarily or just the other time that's not, quote, in season. They really saw how much other stuff we were doing outside of when we were what our contract says we do, right? And I think that was a huge shift in the coaching world, football specifically, because that was kind of when it affected it. Saw how much like extra time was like, wow, like normally I'd be doing this or we'd be doing this, and I'm not doing that right now. Holy shit. Like, this is unbelievable. The amount of time that I actually put in, quote, off the books, or, what contractually says I don't need to be doing. And then, for some of those guys, it was like, I don't need this. Like, really? Like, I don't need that $3,000 weight room stipend in the spring, or like, look at all this extra time I got with my kids or my wife or just my family in general to do maybe something that like I always wanted to do, or I said it was my hobby, but now I really got to dive into it. To take that step back and look at that from a greater picture, kind of like, I think hit something in the football coaching world where guys were like, man, like, I've centered every bit of my life around this, and this is just not like what I thought it was. But they needed that, like, something on the magnitude of a massive pandemic for them to realize really like what was going on, or the realities of it. And look, that for me personally, like, that was a time when, I was like starting to form a family, like got engaged, like that whole kind of, didn't have kids yet, but like looking at it going, wow, like that's how much time I put into that. Like, what happens when I start a family? Like, do I really want to do that? And that was kind of for me personally where I made that decision of like, look, head coaching life, I don't think that's for me. Like, I'd rather be the assistant. I'm still going to put in that same time and whatnot, but to not have to handle all of that extra that goes into being a head coach, like, by definition, because look, I've worked with Dave, I've worked with other guys. Like, I see how much, and knowing my personality, right? Like, knowing that it's going to be all in or nothing, like, and I'm not missing something that's voluntarily, or, hey, you don't have to be here. Like, no bullshit. Like, I'm the assistant.
Yes.
Like, I'm in, like, I'm there. Like, my guys need to see me in order to get that. Right. So just seeing that made a lot of decisions for me, or helped me make them, that I think, I don't know if I would have made them that way, or I probably would have still looked to be a head coach or done something of that nature. But that really kind of, that self-aware allowed me to get that self-awareness that really, like, this is how I want to approach it, and this is what I want to do.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I just think it was big. And I don't know if some of these other, like, guys aren't going to get that, because we're not going to have a pandemic every year, right? Like, hopefully not. Like, hopefully hopefully they understand that, like, this is where, like, really look at yourself, man. And not to bag on the younger generation, but like, I just don't know if they get as vested in certain things to the depths that like maybe we did older, because there's just so many more opportunities, and they see so much more with social media across the board. They're exposed to so many different things at such a young age, where for us, it was almost like tunnel vision of like, this is what it is, this is how you do it, and then you go. And I get that exposure, or that, they get to see things on social media, and like just things that we never saw unless somebody told us or we were in it. And, I just think it's different.
And I think for me, whenever we have a pause in our lives, for us, it's coaching, whether it's a pandemic or for me being fired, I realize being fired, I can allow myself to be burned and take that firing and be bitter. And as the saying goes, bleed upon people who never cut me. Or I can be fired up and say, listen, I'm going to be fired up for fill in the blank, for the next coaching opportunity, for the next thing my family needs me to be out for, whatever it is. And just use that approach. And once again, how many young men do we have in our programs that don't have the C, literally or figuratively, on their jersey? They're not a team captain, but they're more of a leader than some of our team captains because 100%. Of what they do. And, so I realize that, I don't currently have a team right now, and I may or may not a year from now, 5 years from now, like Coach Schumann, whatever it is. But Coach Schumann, I know you from this. That's it,
Right. Of course, yeah.
But who knows? God could be looking down at you right now, being like, "This is what I called you to." You personally, like, you are being more of a coach to your son and to his friends.
Yeah,
greater ways to realize, So I think, what this has allowed me to do is to really reflect on all those cliches in coaching, all those little things we say, to realize, damn, there's so much truth to everything we say, and as we've said for years, it never has, never will just apply to the sport we coach. These are life lessons that if we get our ego out of the way, can help propel ourselves and those around us to greater heights than we ever realized.
And Coach, it's funny because like before we got on, Dave, before you got on, we talked a little bit off air of, Coach had, 9 schools reach out for him and opportunities, out of state. And sitting back and looking at it, it's like you're offering me this position, but you don't know a damn thing about who I am as a person, as a coach. You just know what you've seen social media wise, or maybe you talked to somebody who knew me by watching my video, like, and now you want to embrace and say, here's a program for you. Like, is that really the right fit? Or is it just, hey, we're just looking for some type of like shock hire to bring some, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
so we talked about like that self-awareness of knowing where you want to be and build that foundation, and don't rush right into something, if it's a year off, to get the lay of the land and understand, where I want to go. Cause the worst thing is to jump into something that you think feels right at the moment, and then all of a sudden you're there and it's nothing like it is. And now a year later, you're in this conundrum of, well, I did this or I made this move and now I'm here. And you know what I mean? Like some of that, those, conversations are tough, but sometimes you got to sit in it a little bit. Right. And let it stir and understand how to manage those emotions and not fly off the whim, and understand that we have all matured in our age as we've gotten a little older. Cause look, I'm sure, Coach Hines 7 years ago getting fired in that manner, like now you might have kicked that door off the hinges, right? Like, or
podcast in prison.
Yeah, like I know what I mean. Like we're talking a different way. And look, and I know Dave. I don't want to speak for Dave.
You don't want to be a podcaster in prison. Although I've seen a few podcasts that are from prison. These guys got like all kinds of followers. But
no, and I don't want to speak for Dave, but like he's been in some of these positions, and just having worked with him for so many years and seeing, the change in who he is, and as a, like, you know what I mean? Like some of these situations as younger guys, having not matured, or call it whatever it is, just not been through it or seen it or seen how other people have handled it, right? Like we would have gone about it a different way, and it might have not been the right way, so I think, look, at the end of the day, even like blessings are curses, and the other way too. Curses are blessings in some points. You know what I mean? Like, and I just think like God's always going to put you where you need to be, and he's never going to give you something that you can't handle, or something to learn from, or how to maneuver within it. And for someone that's so rooted in their faith, like you're following the right path, the right journey, like your feet are right where it needs to be. Right. And look, I don't want to speak for you either, Coach, but like you have a partner in your wife that's been a rock and a stable and a voice of reason for you, that like, hey, we love where we live. Let's not go take a job 2 hours away just because, or something of that. You know what I mean? Like 100%. That partner in crime, that ride or die that you can find. Like we're fortunate to find those people. Right. And some people aren't like that, or don't have that. So that I think too is rooted in faith, but then rooted in your partner, I think is something in this process that helps so much.
Oh, tremendously. Absolutely. I also heard years ago, who was it? Wayne Dyer. He's since passed away. I'm not sure if you guys remember who he was, but he talked about ego. And I always thought ego was that cocky, arrogant player or coach that thought they were better than others. And there's definitely, that's a huge part of ego. But he broke down ego is EGO, anytime we edge God out. And when I had the first job, the only job so far I applied for, when I had the 4 interviews, my ego got in the way, not in a good way. And I was thinking to myself, let me show the world that I got fired, and boom, within a week I had a new job. Well, that wasn't what God wanted for me, or planned for me. Or maybe my ego, the arrogance, would start creeping back, or whatever, that I didn't even think I had, and being able to sit back and say, God, I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
How great is it when a player says, when you say to Tommy, whoever, who's been a quarterback his whole life, but he's always been a second or third string quarterback, you're like, Tommy, you're a better DN than you are a quarterback, and it may not be what you want, but he just trusts you. And you're like, yes, thank you for trusting me. And you put him in a position
blind fate.
Yeah, and where he can succeed, and he takes that coaching, and he is a far better DN than he would have ever been a third string quarterback.
100%.
Coaches were like, thank you for trusting us. I'm sure God looks down at a lot of us and says, listen, let me put the players where they need to be. You just have your equipment on, be ready to go, And when I put you in there, go do your thing. So there's a
and
lot
I think that goes back to part of the whole like learning how to delegate type of thing, right? To give up control, ultimately to give up control of yourself as a person, right? And just say, look, like I can't control some of these factors or things that have gone on, or hey, that's in the past. Like, I'm not going to dwell on that. We're going to focus on moving forward. Like, that's a lot easier said than done. And especially for us as coaches, and for you guys have been head coaches where, you know, your name's on it. Like, literally, your name is on it. Like, they don't say that the special teams coordinator cost so and so a game, like, or rarely do they. A parent probably does, but like, you know, for the most part, it's the head coach that takes all the bullets and all that kind of stuff. Like, to give up some of that control, especially when it comes to career and which direction you're going to go with that, that's difficult. Like, to sit back and say, look, I'm not in control right now. And wherever I'm going to end up is based off of, like, you know, I'm just going to leave it in your hands and you take it. And that's hard.
Yeah. Hard, but yes, at the same time, so freeing.
So freeing to be like, finally not have to make those decisions, right? Where you're always the decision maker, always. Like, from how many sprints we're doing to what time practice is to what we're wearing, like, to just kind of sit back and be like, look, it is what it is. Like, where are we going? Like, that is so freeing. Weight lifted off the shoulders, to say the least.
100%.
No doubt. It's very it's very interesting how like things go. Like, I'm just thinking back, like if I didn't step down as a coach, like I probably would never coach my kid in maybe in the spring, maybe something if I had more time then, but I would have definitely never been able to coach him in football. No way. So, because football season, your time is just dedicated to that. Like even if you could physically make it over there in time, you're mentally not there to help them the way that you need to. So, I just think that, and I would have just trudged down that road. But I do think that like a lot of these things happen, because these are just steps, and we all look at as coaches. We all look at the guy who coached, I don't know, the person who coached 50 years as a head coach, and he just was head coach forever or whatever. And he won, wins all these championships, and they talk about him as a legend. And in the back of our head, we think that that's what we want to be, but God knows where we should go. And like for me, like one of my friends said this to me, like, God puts people in your lives for a lifetime, for a short time, for a day, for a month, and you don't know which part of those group of people or situations he's working on. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't know. You don't know if this is your lifetime friend or your friend for a month. And do they all serve a purpose? Absolutely, right? Because it's his purpose, right? So they all serve a purpose, but there are people, and one of the things I saw this happen a lot was when I was running. I used to run these showcase camps all over the country, and we would travel for 22 weekends straight in the spring. 22 weeks, like for 9 years, 22 weekends straight, and I was a head coach too.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. Okay. But that's how I was so high energy at that time. And Derek started to meet me towards I would say maybe the back end of that part of it. I was still doing it.
You're still doing it, but definitely not on the level but I came around.
But we would travel all the time, and you'd see all these different people, and you would have people that would work with you for a day at a camp, and you would be like, that guy was awesome. And I can tell you, I've never seen some of those guys ever again. Okay. There are guys that were on the road with me for 5-6 years, and it was just amazing ride. Not only was it fun coaching the kids, but like we run all these showcases coaching the kids, but like hanging out with everybody. Like, it was almost like I was thrown back to college for a time period, because we would hang out, we go out to eat, all of us were either single or they were newly married, they didn't have kids yet. And we were all doing this at the same time period. So it was a ton of fun. It was a ton of stress, but it was like, And then all of a sudden, you know, it was amazing was like for some of those guys, when we stopped doing it as much, like I maybe a year or so, I talked to some of them, and some of them I haven't talked to forever.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like, wow, as you get older, you start to think that part was so important and it was so enjoyable and was stressful and enjoyable. But when you were in it, it was the only thing I thought about. Like we were doing really well financially and we're you were in it. And then all of a sudden you were not in it, you know, and it was like, wow, that's like sometimes you think, was that like a dream? Like a dream
Right.
part of your life? It's just like when you wake up, you know, and you're 50 and you say, you know, like amazingly, the high school I went to, they put some of our old films up on YouTube. And every once in a while, I'll go up there and watch it, and I'll be like, you know, I remember it, but like, it doesn't seem like that was me anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, that was me. I see myself out there, but it doesn't, you know, like you're in the present of the time that you're in, and you're dealing with the things that you're dealing with in that present, and and God is pushing you in different directions, and you can look out to what you want your future to be, and you can think that that's what you want your future to be, but like things change. Like things that I thought I was gonna be doing, like I was gonna do this, you know, forever. No, like I used to always I look back at my yearbook. I wanted nothing to do with coaching. Okay,
Really?
I wanted to play sports. I wanted to be a pro athlete. I did not want to be a coach. It was the last thing I wanted to be.
That's funny.
Because my father was a coach. He was a great coach. And I always thought I could never match that, you know. And I always thought, you know, we grew up poor and parents are divorced and my mother was on welfare. And though my father, obviously, because he lived across town, he was a teacher, he was able to obviously help out. But I just thought, man, I wanted to be in business and I wanted to like just make endless money. That was like my main goal, you know. And amazingly, what's happened is I was able to somehow mesh both worlds in some amazing, crazy way.
Yeah.
But at first, like those were not things that I was ever thinking about, you know. And you know, and all of a sudden I'm working there, and I'm at 26 years old. I was making already more money than I ever thought I could ever make, and working in New York City, and my father calls me up. He's like, "How's things going?" I'm like, "Eh." He's like, "What's the problem, dude? Like, what's your problem?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Is this all there is?" I said to him. I'm like, "What do you mean? What is this all there is?" I made the mistake of my wife says I made the mistake of kind of getting introspective at that moment. But I said, "Is this all there is? I'm making $200,000 a year. I'm 26 years old. I was doing unbelievably well,
Yeah.
and is this all there is?" He's like, "Well, what do you want there to be? Like, you know, like
Right.
go get married, have some kids." I'm like, "Yeah, you know, maybe I should like start helping people too." And he's like, "Well, if that's what you want to do, think about it. You let me know." He's like, you know, obviously he was coaching. He was coaching at my old high school. He's like, I'll figure something out. 6 months went by. It kept kind of moving in that direction. And then 9/11 hit.
Hmm.
9/11 hit. And I thought, my client was on the 105th floor that I worked with for a long time. I was no longer in that role, only a few months where I would otherwise, it doesn't mean I would have been there, but there could have been a chance. I could have had a meeting, you know, anything could happen. And that was one of our clients. So I was like, you know what? Like, maybe I'll take him up and see how it goes. And that was really it. Like, I said, I'm never coaching football. So I said, I'll coach track with you. And I coach track with him. And I'm there, I'm coaching track, and the football coaches would pin me because I went to that high school, and they would pin me up against the wall, literally, like they were crazy. They were literally like corner me, and I'm like, what do you corner me for? I'm like, I ain't coaching football, dude. Like I ain't. And they're like, come on, what are you kidding me? I walk through the halls, I see your face here, see your face there. You just got to coach track, you know? And I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I'm just here because I think this may be something I want to do, you know? And these guys, they were relentless. They really were. I mean, but I'm thankful to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because finally I broke down and I said, listen, I'll coach football, but I'm telling you, I ain't putting in 9,000 hours. I ain't coming in here on Sundays and just watching film all day long. Like, I'll coach a position. I'll make those kids great, but I ain't doing it. I was hoping they would say, you know, like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Those sons of bitches, they said, whatever you want. That's what they said to me. Whatever you want. We just
because they knew what would come of it. They knew who you were as a person.
You want. Derek, this is true. And it wasn't just Darren White. It was actually Darren was kind of more like who you know. Darren was more like, if you want to coach, coach. If you don't want to coach, coach. We'd love to have you. But it was really like these guys were the junior coaches forever. And now they moved up to the high school and they were the OCDCs. And they were like, really like, the one guy was a teacher at another place, and the other guy was a blue collar guy who just was a tough defensive coach, you know. And he was the guy who really said he needed my help, and he'd be like, "Come on," he's like, "Come to my deli," and be like, "Come over here." I'd be talking to people. They'd be picking me. I'd be walking. You know, sometimes I would go for walks, you know, and I'd be walking, and a cop car would pull up. They'd be telling me to hop in. And this would be parents. They were cops. Yo, you got to coach. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going on here? I just moved back here. Like, so I coached. And from that point forward, I knew I was in deep trouble. Like, and I avoided everything. Like, they had lifting where I wouldn't go to the lifting. I was a terrible, like, you know, I just wanted to coach the position. I didn't want if they had me as a wide receiver DB. I just wanted to coach the wide receivers DBs. I didn't want to be bothered with anything else. And I was the exact coach that I never would want to hire. Okay. And so finally, you know, I'm like, they're like, hey, we're doing a 7-7 here. Come watch. I watched. I sat there. I don't think I said a word. Like, I just watched. And I'm like, oh, these kids are pretty good. Like, these kids are actually pretty good, like, players. Like, it's not the high school that I went to. Like, you know, it wasn't that great. And they, like, actually care. So then I went to, like, a lifting workout just to watch. These kids were lifting outside. There was something going on with the weight room. They were, like, building a weight room or something. These kids were lifting outside in the 100-degree heat.
Love it.
Like, wow. I'm like, these kids want to be good. Like, they actually want to be good. And so I started coming to more. And then camp started. Once camp started, like, I knew, like, hey, you got to be all in if you're in camp. Like, that's just kind of, so did whatever they needed to do. But I was in. Like, I was like, you know, now they're asking me for suggestions. But, you know, what I realized thinking back on all those things is, like, you know, God was, like, pushing me a little bit here at a time. And John Fragale Sr., who was defensive coordinator, big burly guy, like, smoked cigarettes all the time, 6'4". His son was our inside linebacker, unbelievable player. His son was 6'4". He was 6'4", 6'3", 270 pounds, not fat, like, didn't lift, but was just strong. You know, the father I'm talking about. Smoked cigarettes, owned a deli, was like a town guy. I didn't even know him because when I was playing, he was a young guy, you know. And you know, like, would go through, and you know, I was just like, I just like this guy. Like, he's not me at all, but I just liked him. Yeah. And he would have me to the deli, and he would draw up these schemes, and he would be like, yo, come over on a Monday. And like, he would draw these schemes up, and he would run a 4-4 defense cover. He always sat in cover 3, always. Like, and I got him to play man-to-man against some teams, which was like a leap of faith, you know. But he would sit in 4-4 cover 3, but he would have these elaborate blitz schemes at just sitting in cover 3, dude, just sitting in it.
Love it.
And it was amazing what he was doing. And I was like, man, you could always learn from people. Like, this guy didn't go to college, didn't play out. I think he got kicked off his high school team, you know, like, and he always learned things from him. And I was like, shit, you know, They ran the Navy triple option. And I was like, shit, I'm learning things from these guys. And like, I didn't expect to learn a thing. That's how arrogant I was. I'm like, what are these guys going to teach me? I played one football, like, and so it started to learn these things. And that's why I was like, man, like I never talked to John Fragale Sr. anymore. Never. But when I was in that time period, I talked to that guy like almost every day.
Yeah.
And he would say the craziest things. I have stories from him that other coaches that were from North Jersey, where I'm from, that I coached, we would coach against them, and I ended up coaching with some of these guys. They would ask me to just tell kids these stories.
That's
and I
funny.
would tell them stories. And his stories were the greatest stories because they were not what you would say coaches should be like. His best friend was the OC, and he would rip on his best friend to me. Like he would rip on him. He'd be like, what the fuck is he doing? And I was 28 years old. I didn't know anything. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, isn't that your best friend? You know? So like I was learning these things in coaching, that was just like, and it was trial by fire. And he would sit there and he would smoke cigarettes. And I tell these stories because I was not like that. Like I was against those kind of things, but I didn't judge him. You know what I mean? Like that was one of the things I was like, you know what? I'm not going to judge him, even at 20 years old. I'm not going to judge him because I don't know what his life has been like and what he is, what he's had to do. And as I learned more about him, the man had to crawl, and for everything he had. But, and he was very successful, like financially. But I would learn from him, and I just found him fascinating. And he was from a time period. Let me tell you something. We would tackle like there was nobody's business. Like we were great. You wouldn't do these things now. We were great, I could tell you, because these kids, that was almost what they needed. We only had 30 kids on the team, and they were stone cold killers. Stone cold killer. Now, we would lose in the state semifinals because maybe some of those things would catch up with us. I always think like maybe that stuff would catch up with us. But they would have never gotten there if they didn't do all those things. Like that was one of the things I learned. Like those, like people were like, oh, like I'm a big Feed the Cats guy. So was Derek. Like we love that modern stuff, not that I don't believe in a lot of the old school stuff. I do. Right. But keep them fresh, play fast, all those. I believe in all that stuff. But I always think that there was a beauty in that time period of, in order to turn that program around the way they had to do it, they had to make those kids believe that they were the toughest kids in the room. Yes. And would fight us in the ass sometimes when we would get to the state semis. But that team, we beat Patterson Catholic, who was just unbelievable. Like 10 Division I players. Like we would beat teams we had no business beating. Not that we didn't have athletes. We had some great athletes. But they were tough. Like they would go through a wall for that DC.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the end to the detriment, and the fact that they got rid of him at some point because he was so over the top. But he also built the program. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So eventually they had to get rid of him because he was getting crazier and crazier, like crazier and crazier. Yeah. And but it was what made him great too. So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and obviously I don't know the coaches you're talking about, but having played those days, I realize I make myself sound so old saying this. I think that's one part of football that we're, unfortunately, I hate to say this, probably never going to get back to.
No, you never.
With the transfer portal, with the NIL deals, it's so less about us being and you can fill in the blank, whatever your school mascot was, being an Eagle, Islander, being whatever it was, and being where your feet are, and taking pride in the fact that, hey, coach keeps praising me for being the best scout team player. And I know in a year from now, I'm going to be a starter. Sorry. My wife's calling me. Sorry.
Back. There you go.
Oh, always. But, that mentality of, hey, I'm going to fight through this, and getting young men to believe, hey, listen, we're the toughest son of a guns this side of, the Mississippi, so to speak, whatever.
Yep.
Because what and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too deep, but with the transfer portal and with kids I'm not starting to just get up and go somewhere else, even at the high school level now.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're creating, and the adults are allowing it, a generation of, hey, things are tough, pack it in, go somewhere else. You get married, the first big fight you have with your wife, don't worry about it. There's countless other women.
Get used to it.
You know? And I think there's so much beauty in that. Like you said, there's wisdom to doing a little bit less and keeping players fresh and healthy.
There's no doubt.
However, I think there's a lot of beauty to the, hey, listen, we only have 30 players in our team because the other 40 quit because they couldn't handle it. But you 30 son of a guns are the toughest kids in Jersey or whatever it was. And whether they were or they weren't, they believed it to their core because the coaches believed it. And the coaches knew they were creating a mentality and a brotherhood and a resiliency that's almost a lost art in some ways.
No, there's no doubt. And the transfer portal and all that stuff, we always go back and forth. I would say it's the ultimate pro and the con at the same time. It's the ultimate. There's a pro and a complete opposite con to it at the same exact time. Meaning, yes, a kid who gets screwed somewhere, there's an opportunity for him, right? Then there's also a kid who bails out too early because he doesn't learn and he loses out an opportunity, he never plays football again. Like there's
6,000 kids still sitting there that don't have homes right now. Like that's the back end of this. That's the back end of this that nobody will talk about.
It's
and look, it's not
pro and con.
And it's not one of these things where, hey, I'm just going to go back to the school I was at. Like that like for some of those things, those spots are now gone, which was never either communicated or they didn't look at that or even think about that part of it, right? Like, wait, I thought that was the net under the trapeze for me, and I'm just going to go take some, and if it doesn't work, I can go. Sorry, buddy, like that, I already filled that spot, and you know what? Like, you shot me a text message telling me you were leaving my team. Like, sorry, bud, you're not the player I thought you were. Off it. I don't really want you. Sorry. Like, that's a hard reality for what a lot of this is. That the world hasn't really been a part of it.
It's very difficult because it's that whole world is the world has changed so much and a lot of things that I don't agree with, but there's also a lot of things that we've created too, in a sense. Like the coach who went too far helped create some of these things. I mean, that's why I say that. Like, I was a big guy when I was young. Like my first, I was Mr. It's funny because I coach youth kids and we rarely take cash to the ground and we rarely go live. I bought all these different kinds of pads, rugby pad, you name it. I got them. And so we tackle well. We tackle great in games, but I had to go through these lengths because I didn't want them. Now, if you were to see me at 28, man, my DBs, they'd be standing there. I know there were twirly birds going around, and I made them get right back in there again, So, and that was my DBs. Like, I remember, as crazy as those guys were, they would look over. The head coach would be looking over and be like, I don't know what the fuck Schumann's doing over there, but that guy's crazy, So, I said, don't leave me alone in individual drills too long because, I'm coming up with stuff. And that's what it was when I was young. And, but that's how the overall culture was like of our team. And there was beauty in that. It's hard to recapture that now in the same exact way because of the way things are. And some of it is, very reasonable. But I have to say, like, some of it we created, like the guy who didn't pull it back at the right time and got a kid really, really seriously hurt. I'm not saying he did it intentionally, but those things end up taking a step in the direction. And in a sport like football, I always say, like, if you go back to Teddy Roosevelt, right? When Teddy Roosevelt stepped in with the flying wedge, okay? I'm doing this whole AI series of every single national champion from 1871 to now, and I'm up to 1936 is my next one. So I've already done like 60 years of it. And the flying wedge during the Teddy Roosevelt era almost ended football because guys were dying.
Literally.
dying. You know, like dying, like 20, I think it was like 20 or 30 deaths in college football that year. Yeah, and Teddy Roosevelt stepped in and made
he started to really set some parameters for what the game was going to be either become or how it was going to evolve, because otherwise you just couldn't. Like I remember.
Yeah, so like the Ivy League schools were they were the ones running with that flying wedge. Ivy League, University of Chicago, some of those Big Ten schools, Yost and them, and they were running with this wedge, dude. I mean, dudes were getting, like, if you could ever find footage of it, it's craziness. Like, if you saw it, if people saw it now, it's I don't know. Guys were getting launched over the top, and another guy was going. Guys were going in medium. It was like a death trap, but it was the game, and so you see, like, that's an extreme example of, like, okay, football evolved, but in football, when you think about where does it all go, because of the dangerous nature of football, it, to my mind, only goes to that it can only be constantly reformed. Yeah. And to what point do they say, like boxing got to, this is the sport, we're not changing it anymore because you choose to play it. This is the risks. This is where it is. Boxing, MMA kind of is like that too, right? Yeah. This is what the risk is, because boxing, they used to have Jack Johnson's era. They would fight. Someone just, like, there was no end in rounds, and eventually someone said, "Hey, a lot of people are dying from this. Should we reform it?" And they reformed it. And then eventually, it got to a point where it is now, and they're basically like, "Hey, if you're gonna box, this is what the sport is. You want to be a pro boxer. These are the risks. These are the safety tactics we have in place to eliminate the fact that guys could die in the ring. Right. But you could die in the ring." Right? Same thing with MMA, right? So football will be at some point in probably in the near future where that will be at a point. Otherwise, will be flagged. Which would end up being the end of football anyway if it went to that point. But I think what it'll be is like, hey, these are the rules. Yeah, we'll refine some things here and there, but this is kind of the Mendoza line of where it's at, right? And that's where it's at. And football kind of, because any kind of contact sport, that's where you eventually have to go. Yep. You eventually have to go. Like lacrosse had to go there. With women's lacrosse, they had to say, "Hey, it's no contact." Okay. But I think that's what makes it great. Like that's, to me, that's what sports is, the greatest thing about sports. Like, as much as I get mad at some of these things, and I do, like, what other thing can never change but always change?
It's always evolving, yeah. Yeah. I think also there's the safety aspects of the game, which I agree with, kind of. I mean, yes, we want to keep our young men safe, but I think some of the rules, defenseless player, listen, they're on the field, they're not defenseless. They chose to be on that field and all that different stuff. That might
they got $1,000 worth of equipment on as well, which is constantly evolving too, right? Like, we're changing up that aspect of the game itself, or we're taking away, because who actually wears knee pads that cover their knees? But that's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different question. Yeah, that's another 3 podcasts, but you know what I mean? But the technology that's going into it and all those kind of things. Also, like, look, I was a safety. Like, the rule was, if a guy went across the middle, like, he didn't do it again. But you know what? Like, now towards the end of my career, where the rules started to change a little bit, right around that 2008 era of, hey, now I got to think about, am I going to drive on this dig as hard? Because now is my safety in jeopardy, because I've played the game, one way, and now all of a sudden I got to pull up short because I don't want to hit this guy and get a 15-yarder and cost my team. Like, so now my foot's going in the ground a different direction, right? Like, everything has a recourse or something of it, right? Which is the evolution of it, which is phenomenal. And the fact that we see trends that have gone away and now they're coming back and all those kind of, like, that's what makes the game great. The constant evolution of fullbacks. Derek, look, you watching the Rams, dude.
They were gone.
Right. And then Michigan wins the national championship. And now it's, how do we flock to it? Right. It's different. Like, that's,
Let's
the
line
spread
up a
offenses that
lineman
were
out
all
there.
the trend, right? Or defenses where now, like, how many times do you see 3 true linebackers on a field? Like, that's not the case, you know, or the edge rusher, just in general, of like, you know, what these guys do athletically and all that. It just changes, and it changes. Like, if you want to sit in the past and be the old head that doesn't want to change and do things a certain way, well, okay, but your program's going to suffer because of that. The kids in your program are going to suffer because of that. That's why this game is so great, is because it's always changing, but you got to evolve with it. You don't have to sell your soul to it, but you know what? You better sell it enough that those kids want to be a part of it, and you can now provide for them rather than hold them back because you're stubborn or because you're not willing to educate yourself on the nuances moving forward. You don't have to like it, but you might have to play the game a little bit, right?
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
just, it's what this game, it's what it is.
And there's obviously standards you always have to have, right? Like, you know, like if a parent, even with, you know, my son's gonna be 11, if a parent's upset that I expect them to be at practice, well, you know,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
don't care. Sorry. Like, I expect you to be at practice. Now, you know, with young kids, yeah, I get it. Everyone plays 90 different sports. Okay. And if something happens occasionally, I have to deal with that. That's one of the youth things you got to deal with. But, you know, other than a certain circumstance, I expect to be at practice. That's a standard, a simple standard that you should be able to adhere to as part of being a part of your program without, you know, going into what you want to do succeed wise and wins and loss. But that's a simple standard, right? For most people can understand. And you have to have whatever your standards are and be able to hold to your standards. But there's no doubt. It's funny because, like, when people say that I'm tough now, I think it's laughable. Like,
Oh
because
God, compared to what we used to be.
I'm like, I mean, tough. I would take wide receivers and DBs who you would normally think are your softest guys on the team, you know, in most high schools, and I should have them kill each other, you know, like that's what I was doing. So, like I would tell my wide receivers, if you don't stalk back that damn guy out the back of the end zone, okay, we got problems. And then I used to give them rewards for that, you know, like nowadays, if my kid just got in front of somebody, I'm thrilled. Get in front of him, keep his hands in front of him. Don't let him get by you, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
You get a pancake out of a damn wide receiver. God forbid someone actually pancake somebody out there. But yeah, I mean, so you know, it's the mentality. Now the standard is, hey, you got to block them. I don't get as many pancakes as I would like to get out of those guys, but I want them to block the at least. Listen, your guy cannot make the play. That's it.
Yeah.
So, you know, but you know, you evolve those certain things, but it is amazing because we're parents and I would say in public school, because administrators, you know, when it changes administration, I don't know if this is true out where you are. This is what I see in Jersey a lot. There are still some coaches that become administrators. It is not in the old days. That's who were the administrators.
Agreed.
Okay. The ADs were former coaches, a lot of times football coaches, you know, but if not, guys were coaches. A lot of the principal, if not the principal, the vice principal was a former athlete, a former coach. Like that was how in the old days, especially when my father was teaching, you know, how those guys cut their teeth, right? Like, you know, you became a coach. You learn how to become a leader by becoming a coach, and then we let you lead the school, okay? Because you learn to lead kids, not just as a teacher, but you learn to lead them on the field where it was a little bit more dynamic environment, right? And now you can lead the school where you're dealing with all these different things. That's changed a lot, especially in public school, where you got guys that have never played that are administrators. You got and gals that if they did play, don't really understand, you know, the depths of expectations to become great, right? And I don't understand. To me, it's always hard for me why you can't hold people to the standards of trying to achieve greatness. It doesn't mean that you will get there.
Yep.
No one's saying they will. you want to try to go through that process to achieve greatness. Becoming great is a very difficult process, even if you do everything right.
Yeah.
But the process of trying to achieve greatness, like that to me always is like, that should be celebrated in your school. That should be celebrated, but it's
Agreed.
not celebrated as much. And coaches have a hard time with it. Coaches leave schools, not just are let go, but leave coaching, which I think is a shame, because people say, hey, man, we just want them to go out and participate. Like,
yeah. And I was going to say, I think far too few administrators in today's day and age understand the impact that a successful sports program can have in not just the school community, but the entire community. If you allow coaches, and like you said, there's always the outliers. There are coaches that aren't doing it for the right reasons, that it's dangerous, whatever. But the great majority of them, I think, if the administrators would step back and be like, all right, and they won't. Some maybe, but take notes from successful male and female head coaches of how are they running their program. And if I run the school like that, it'd be a lot more successful if they took some notes from head coaches and assistant coaches and how to tough love and pour into a young man and a young woman. And
delegation,
yeah.
managing, both managing personalities, just all of that is head coaches handle so many different aspects of quote leadership on a daily basis, an hourly basis, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? Like the things that come across a head coach's desk, are so similar to how, you run a school or just being a principal, whatever that is. There's so many things that directly correlate.
Similar, and I think a lot more challenging because maybe there are parents out there. They certainly weren't mine, and certainly not my wife and I. But most parents don't get fired up and amped up about a science grade or a math grade. Or,
yes.
They might care and want their son or daughter to do better. They may send an email to a teacher, but there's so much heart and passion and emotion tied into sports and athletics, and your sons and daughters. Coaches deal with a lot more pressure, I think, than most people who haven't been in our shoes will ever realize.
They've never read the email chains. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'll say this, Kurt. You know what? And my point on this is, yeah, you're 100% right. People do not get excited about their 99 on a science grade. But you know what? The part of the problem is that's because administrators are not celebrating those things properly, right? And like we don't see one of the things that sports has always done a great job of, and because it is exciting because it's more physical than it is physical and mental. I get it, but like there's a lot of physicality to it, right? So you see outwardly what happens where school work is more mentally, it's not as seen. But we don't do a good enough job of celebrating things. We don't do a good enough job. I'm not saying it's going to be as exciting, but figuring out real reward system. Listen, everyone loves when they make the honor roll. I was on honor roll a million times. I never got excited over it. Okay. It was kind of a standard that my parents had for me, but it wasn't like would get more excited if I scored a touchdown than it would if I made the honor roll, every single. So that tells me also maybe there should be a better reward system in schools for people. Because if you want people to be great in school, right? If you want the people at the middle level to raise their bar academically, not just the kids that are naturally great students or have parents that are super driven to make them be great students. A lot of those kids do it reluctantly just because culturally they know they have to do it in order to be successful in life, but they're not excited about it. The school could do more to make that exciting. We should do more to make that kid that we would say is the nerd look a little bit better among his peers for being smart. Yep. How do we put them up on a pedestal? We don't do a good job of that, right? Coaches in sports do a great job of it. They know how to give them helmet decals. They know how to, people, they know how to give them, like with me and my young kids. Let me tell you something. You've never seen kids work harder for some baseball cards or football cards. Boy, they will they will go through a wall full of football cards, a nice shiny football card of their favorite player. Let me tell you something. You'll get touchdowns out of that. Okay. But that's a reward system. Like, we don't do those things in school.
Yeah.
We don't go and say to them, hey man, if you get a 99% on your grade or 100 on your test, you guys tell me what your favorite athlete is. And next week I'll have a football card, baseball card, soccer card of your favorite athlete available to you, or a pack of that sport available to you. Like, mesh those two worlds. So they say, you know what? I want to be good at school. Because my favorite teachers were definitely teachers that did some of that. They didn't, it wasn't, they were never rewarded for that. They were never rewarded as teachers for that. No one rewards the teacher for getting the very most out of their students. Oh, yes, they bring them in front of the Falcon and they say, you're a great teacher. I'm like, they don't understand what human motivation is. That doesn't motivate the human being. That other peer teachers who they don't even hang out with outside of school say you're great. Like, how does that motivate me? I don't hang out with them anyway.
Agreed.
You're teacher of the year. Great. Like, does that get me a date with a prettier woman? You know what I mean? So, like, those are the things that are I think in education. Look, it's coming. It's coming because the reckoning is coming from that standpoint, education wise. And we gotta let you go soon before your wife gets really out. But I think the reckoning is coming because people are pulling away to certain things. Like, I hate to say it, but like, when you could go on ChatGPT and get all the answers to the questions, you better figure out how you're going to educate kids.
Yep, 100%.
Because if I could educate myself, if I could go and tell my kid, hey, listen, I need you to read this book and tell me who the first 10 presidents are. And I could go and ChatGPT myself and just say who are the first 10 presidents are and print it out. And my son says, and with a whole bio on all of them. And my son goes and says the name of the presidents and gets one of them wrong. I'm like, well, you got so-and-so wrong. And then I could just say, oh, those 10 presidents, can you tell me about 3 of them? I have the bio written there. I don't know nothing without knowing anything about history, okay? Even though I do, but like without knowing anything about it, I can go and teach them that.
Yep.
Education has to reform and figure out how we could teach the kids to be thinkers because
100% agree.
Right. Because otherwise I can replace you as a teacher, as a parent.
Yep.
And I don't want to. But if you can't do a great job and teach them how to become thinkers, then what do I need you for as a teacher? Because I could teach them how to do 2 + 2 right here by printing out. I could print out a sheet and hand it to you.
Yeah.
You're
That's
not
teaching football. ChatGPT is not making that tackle. They're not taking that read step. They're not, there's certain things that
it's just like a plumber's going to be it's going to take a long time to replace the plumber. You might eventually, okay? But that guy who comes in and, that thing's bubbling over and no matter what you put into it, it doesn't stop it. He comes in and he fixes that with his hands and he solves a problem that you could tell me what to do, but I don't know when the nuances. That's solving a problem. Football is solving a problem, right? Baseball is solving a problem.
Speaking of solving problems, I am going to have to call my wife back. If not,
no, Coach, you're good. We've taken up way too much of your time. Thank you so much, Coach.
Hey, you guys are awesome. I appreciate you guys, and I know we'll talk again sometime.
Absolutely, Kurt.
Thanks,
it's great
Coach.
having you on. Listen, you're gonna do great things. You're the best, dude.
You guys are awesome. I appreciate you guys. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
You guys.
Good job. I'll let you go because we've had him for 2 hours.
Hey, buddy. All good. Tomorrow,
hey, listen,
Mike Vanucci from LIU receiver. Like, it'd be cool to talk to him and get some actual receiver stuff.
I like what he does. I have great questions for him too because I want to understand.
Good.
I'm sure
look,
you
I've
do
said,
too, by the way. I'm sure you do.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, look, it's a reason I kind of dove into it. Was like, look, let me get this guy on the podcast because it's been a while since we've talked to somebody. But like, look, that's our world, so be good.
Yeah. Wide receiver stuff is everywhere. And
I like what he does because it gears towards like where I think. You know what I'm saying?
okay.
And the method to like his madness on some of the things like intrigues me of like, hey, you're not like there's not a lot that are teaching it that way. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of guys are going all these other whatever directions. Like, why this? You know what I'm saying? So I think it'll be really good.
Did you see I posted a video, like an instruction video that I created like these slides thing from
I saw
Bama
some of the stuff.
receivers.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I thought it was great because it answered for me when I watched the video. Then I asked like I put it through ChatGPT and tried to figure out how I could get the slides going. I used that you should look into Notebook LM. It's free.
I'll look at it.
Yeah, so you could start to do kind of things like that, and it's kind of like clarified what I was seeing on the video. It actually explained it to me even better than the video did. You know what he was doing. So, and I was like, oh, okay, good. Because my hardest thing was the feet in the ground thing. I had to really learn that I was not from that world. You know, I was a receiving coach. Like, so the feet in the ground to get them to give yourself a two-way go thing.
Correct. Like a good base so that you can now plant off either and go rather than like,
you didn't come from that world either, right?
No, we were always like, wait on the
move
front
in one direction or the other, right?
No, it was, pick a side and go. And a lot of it was based off of where the defense was aligned and what's your easiest access point and all those kind of things. You know what I mean? So to see that and kind of, but I think that's involved with how defenses cover you too. You know what I'm saying? Or what scheme, like, what number read am I here? Or what's my job? Am I trying to pull this outside backer a certain direction to open up something else? You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of scheme aspect that kind of went into it because that's how we approached it. I mean, because we were either in twins or trips every time, right? It's not like I was a single or it's just different when it comes to some of the bigger picture stuff. So Absolutely. It'll be good to talk to him, man.
No, it'll be great. Those, the things that I can't like you like Notebook LM is the best thing I've ever seen, by the way, and all the AI stuff I use.
Yeah.
Including I use the vibe coding to build stuff.
Yeah.
The Notebook LM is the best thing ever because I'm able to have it analyze the video or anything, a book, anything.
Right.
And give me these like summaries that like you could hand it to a kid.
Right. And they'll get it.
Yeah, you can hand it to a kid. And I just think it's amazing. And for yourself in coaching, things that you may have difficult with, like within the season, it will be really, really helpful for. But anyway, it seemed like Derek is gone. I wore out my welcome. We'll see you guys next time.